All righty. Well, welcome, new members. Thanks so much for joining us and volunteering to join the grants committee. We really appreciate it. So it seems to me that the agenda for today is to take a look at the state service plan framework, and I guess make any additions or comments that we might have. Kim worked with the executive committee to develop this, so thank you, Kim, for all your work on on this. And so as we can see, can we pull it up?
Yes, so this is the one with the staff input.
Yeah, it's the one that you sent us with the final meeting reminder.
And Lizzie, if you'll take notes within the document and then save it to that.
Yes, yes, it's already ready for that.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so this document approaches the state service plan in a different way than our previous state service plans did. And it's kind of broken up into one area that is focused on volunteers, and the second area focuses on the organizations that need volunteers or recruit volunteers. And the third section, I've now forgotten what the third section focuses on.
It's
communication.
Communications, yeah.
Yeah, the third section focuses on communication and storytelling and letting the world know what is going on in the first two areas. And then the fourth area is it's called Operating with Excellence, and so it's kind of a I would say kind of an infrastructure type section, and that has to do with work plans and donations and that kind of stuff.
And Eileen, if I could add, we also, there's another section that we added, which is stuff that's specifically required under federal statute related to program performance.
Right.
And so that part isn't really open to, thoughtful deliberation by the commission. So we haven't included that bit in yet, but now we're getting close to the end of the process. And so we've included those requirements in a fifth section.
Okay. And so do you feel like we should discuss them at all, or just know what they are? Or
I would say if you have time and can get to it, I would say yes.
Okay.
But the other four are probably going to take up most of the time anyway. So I would say focus on those first four areas.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. One thing I was going to ask is, on the first page, there's a lengthy comment from Anthony. And I don't really know what he's talking about there. So Lizzie or Jim, can you kind of fill us in? I mean, it sounds like he's referring back to a spreadsheet of some kind or database or something like that. But yeah.
Right. Well, so that under that first kind of major focus area, those proposed outputs, those are outputs that the commission developed at the August meeting, and staff went in and did a little bit of editing because the commission wanted the staff to kind of give its input on this stuff. And Anthony's note is specifically related to the Tennessee Serves portal.
Okay.
And what we can and can't do related to the types of reports that we can generate from that portal. So it's not as straightforward as we had hoped in terms of, for example, that first one, the number of individuals that volunteer more than one time a year.
Mm-hmm.
We're working on it. We think it's possible to get that data, but we're not 100% sure that it's going to be exactly what we want. So anyway, that note that Anthony has put in there is related specifically to the types of reports that he is able to run on the Tennessee Serves portal.
Okay. Okay, and so it appears that, like, under the first bullet there, it refers to the repeat volunteerism user list, and then the user data explorer. So is that like two possible ways of gathering the information that we need? Is that what he's?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, sorry, it's still a little bit small for me to be able to read it easily. But
Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah,
That's better. Yeah.
That's better. Yeah. Yeah, so the problem that we were having when he initially was looking at it is that repeat volunteerism user list
Mm-hmm.
didn't allow to set a time range. But that second one, the user data explorer, does allow you to set a date range. But it's not, again, then you have to compare the users to see if they've volunteered more than once. So it's not as straightforward as that first one, the repeat list. But again, the repeat list, at least we don't think, allows you to set a date range.
Okay. Huh.
So anyway, I wouldn't get too bogged down in the notes.
Okay.
I mean, I would say focus on the wording of the outputs, and the percentages and numbers are kind of the things that we're that we can try and get some additional clarity before the retreat.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah, so does anybody have any questions or comments about the proposed outputs in this first section?
Oh, now, Eileen, can I also add, so this first goal is the only one that the commission developed actual outputs for at the August meeting. Then, so that's the only one that's going to have proposed outputs from 8/8/25. Then the staff under each one staff developed proposed outputs. And then through our public comment sessions, there are some that have been recommended by the public. And then below that, it looks like maybe Lizzie had to step away for a second. Below that is another section of, yeah, that's okay. So the sample outputs, those are outputs from previous state plans that may not be an exact fit, but are close to that focus area. And so that's those groupings of those outputs for you all to consider. It's you know, as an example, using this first one, there's too many outputs here. So you all need to kind of winnow out the ones that you don't think should be included, and I guess kind of check mark off the ones that you think should be included. And again, we don't necessarily have to figure out the exact numbers or percentages and that kind of thing right at this moment. The main goal, I think, for the committee right now is to talk about which of these outputs do you think should be included in the final version of the plan. Now, that doesn't mean it is, because all the other committees are doing the same thing, and then the commission at its retreat will then take all of that input and make a final decision on what should be included. But this committee should make that recommendation. And Jessica's asked how many, I would say for each major goal area, probably 4 to 5. You know, you can certainly do more than that, but if you're starting to do more than 4 or 5 outputs per goal area, then you're probably you might be mixing up activities with outputs. And then the other thing is, below the outputs are the outcomes that the commission worked on at the August meeting, and the commission did finalize an outcome for each goal area, but I don't think any of them have any kind of specifics tied to in terms of like a target like that. Engaged and consistent Tennessee Volunteers members participation. There's not really any way of measuring that because it's not tied to any kind of specific target, if that makes sense.
Right.
So that's the other thing to consider is, are there specific targets for those outcomes? Again, you don't have to come up with the exact numbers, but if you have an idea of what that specific target might be, now would be the time to discuss that as well.
So the outcomes, by saying target, I'm assuming that you mean it needs to be measurable in some way.
Yeah. So
okay.
your outcome is the thing that you're ultimately going for, and that typically is some sort of change, an improvement of something, a decrease of something, but something that is measurable. The outputs are just things that you count, like the number of people trained. It doesn't say what happens as a result of that training. That's the outcome. The output is just numbers, like number of volunteers, number of hours, number of trainings, number of programs, those kinds of things go under the outputs. But if you're doing, ideally, the output should then lead into the accomplishment of the outcome.
Okay. And should the output measure improvement, or should it just be strict numbers? So for example, in 2026, we had this many volunteers our target is to have, X number of volunteers who signed up through the portal. Or should it say in 2026, 10% more volunteers signed up than the year before? Do you see what I'm saying? Is it a straight number, or is it the comparison?
Yeah, well, that both of those are examples of outputs. I mean, even though it would be an increase, really an increase in the number of volunteers is still just an output, because what are the volunteers doing? What's the result of that volunteering is what the outcome is. So you can have an output that says that you're going to have an increase of volunteers by 10%, but that still really is just an output because you're counting the number of people who are volunteering and not the results of what that volunteering leads to. And that would be the outcome, is kind of the results of the volunteering.
Okay. So the output can be a straight number, or it can be an increase.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Output.
Eileen,
Yeah.
Eileen, the best example I can give between an output and an outcome that's always really helpful for me is think about it like in a classroom setting. An output might be how many days that student showed up for class.
Okay.
And we want it higher rather than lower, right? So we still want to have a comparison. So we may say our goal is for that child to be there 90% of the time. That would be a great output to measure. The outcome we want to measure is whether they learned anything while they were there. So that's why they still get tested on the material, because just knowing they showed up doesn't tell us whether they learned anything.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that helps, but that's always helpful for me to think showing up is one thing, and then what happens after you show up is kind of the next step.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you. Okay, I think that Jessica put something in the chat. Okay, Jessica says she likes the proposed outputs, staff, and the 3 listed under sample. Okay. Okay. And yeah, can we, yeah, there we go. So staff, oh, okay, I see. You already gathered them in there. So Tennessee's volunteerism rate will increase by 32.2% or whatever number we want to put in there. The number of volunteers will increase by a certain number. All 95 counties will participate in GVSA. And then number of volunteers activated via the corporate social purpose network. So do we think that we should have one that refers to Tennessee Serves? Or are we assuming the first few refer to that?
Yeah, the first few that the commission already kind of decided to include are at the top under that first kind of underlined section. Yeah, that one with the note. Those all kind of refer back to Tennessee Serves.
Right. So should we say Tennessee Serves in there for those, or just have I don't know, have something in parentheses that says Tennessee Serves? I suppose it doesn't hurt to have that clear there.
Does this second one refer only to the Tennessee Serves portal?
Yeah, well, I don't remember the commission really getting into the details at the August meeting.
Yeah.
But I think it's fine for the it's fine for the grants committee to recommend that all of these be tied to Tennessee Serves if that's what you want.
Gotcha.
Because we do have, in addition to the Tennessee Serves portal volunteers, we've got we've got the people who volunteer through the AmeriCorps program. So that would be another thing that we could count for the, the second, third, and fourth one, if you wanted to. But I think the general intent from the August meeting was that these all kind of related to the portal.
Okay, well, I taken note of that suggestion.
When we do, when we get to the action plan phase, I believe there is a column called inputs. And so I suppose that we could specify in that input section in the action plan, data received from Tennessee Serves, data received from AmeriCorps programs. Would those be considered inputs, or am I jumping ahead of myself?
Those could be considered inputs.
Yeah. So that'd be a way to capture that.
Yeah. Well, I think if the grants committee wants to specify that these should be specifically related to the portal, I think that's a fine recommendation. As opposed to, because again, there are other program specific outputs at on that fifth one, that if you wanted to look at some of these things related to programs, that would probably be a better fit there than that top one.
Okay.
And there are some there are a few things in there that are related to members themselves.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I think it's good to have the first one kind of focus on the portal, and have it distinct rather than trying to combine a bunch of data, because the data is not collected in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And the AmeriCorps program is limited to people who actually join the AmeriCorps program. And so that, and there's a minimum there's a minimum age limit. So there are just some things that structurally that make the AmeriCorps program different than the portal.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm fine with this section, just focusing, primarily on the portal, if that's okay with other folks.
Yeah. I know somebody had mentioned these other outputs were of interest. Did we want to discuss these? There was this one that was from the staff, and these were just sample outputs.
Well, the GVSA number, that's quite easy to capture, right? We know that every year how many counties have participated. And I don't know very much about the Corporate Social Purpose Network yet, other than that it's, it exists and it's just starting out. So I don't know if we should include that as one of the outputs. I mean, I suppose we could just put a note, just to say, should this be included here? And see what the other committees think about it when we get to the retreat.
My question is always going to be whether collecting that piece of information adds value to our ability to make decisions. Because they can be incredibly time consuming to collect. And I have found when I'm doing this kind of work that it's easy to get interested in what would be curious to know, as opposed to focusing more specifically on, if we have this information, how will we change what we do next? Or how does it tell us how we should spend money differently? Or how does it tell us that we're overstaffed or understaffed somewhere? That kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So that might be, a helpful thing to think about in terms of, are we ready to collect that? Where would we go get that? That kind of thing. Will we change how we do something because we have that piece of information?
Mm-hmm. So I guess a question for Latifa, or whoever else, on the commission or on staff is involved with the Corporate Social Purpose Network. If number of volunteers is information or data that the network is going to be collecting, and they can just turn over those numbers to us, that makes it easy for us. If they're not collecting it, and we would have to, that would be quite difficult.
That sounds good for this last one. What about these other three? Like this first one, can we apply like the same logic? Sorry, I'm not exactly sure who's speaking because I'm not looking at the screen with names, but it
was Eileen was speaking and Kim was also.
Right. So as maybe Kim had said, are we ready to collect this data, and is it actually going to be useful for us? Besides just, it would be great to know. Mm-hmm. What about these other three?
Well,
I mean, I know I'm the one that put those in the chat. I'm fine letting those first two go. I'm looking at what the goal is and trying to make sure that we have outputs that relate back to that. So that we could say that we met that goal. So I guess the proposed outputs with staff edits kind of attribute to those. I do think we need to keep the GBSA one though, because we mentioned that in the goal.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So maybe I'll take these two out.
Yeah.
So that gives us, if we go with, they're already is this 4? Is this 4 outputs? And then this would give us 6. So do you think that is, we're reaching kind of the max outputs for the first one if we wanted to move on to the second?
I do have a question, since I'm not that familiar with the portal, with regard to the age distribution of volunteers. Does the portal capture that information when people sign up to volunteer? Do they have to put their age or date of birth?
Great question. The answer is it could capture that, but we're not necessarily capturing that. It's based on each individual organization has to capture that by setting up their opportunity to capture that information. And based on their contract, they should be collecting that. We have not necessarily been enforcing that they're collecting that information, so we don't have necessarily the full picture. but we could, like I said, it's in the contracts. We could enforce it. We could get a baseline beyond the kind of incomplete baseline that we currently have.
So it seems like to me that it should be a mandatory field, right? When people sign up to volunteer, because if it's not mandatory and we're only capturing some ages, then we're not getting an accurate picture.
Yes, we would definitely have
Yeah.
to enforce that in a way that we haven't done.
Yeah, right.
I can make a note, although
Yeah,
I'm
make a
pretty
note
sure.
about that, because that's something that we might want to discuss
Okay.
when at the retreat.
Oh, wait, that was the
Yeah.
graphic.
Okay, and the item after that, that's,
This one?
I
The
wonder,
unlimited
yeah, I wonder
time?
if that belongs in the second section, because we're talking about volunteer opportunities in each county.
Yeah, well, I think the point of that one, what from the discussion at the August meeting, is that rural to urban communities,
Mhm.
and so trying to get volunteers kind of across that spread.
Right.
So it is you're correct that it is tied to the opportunities that are available,
Mhm.
but it also is tied to, like, are those people in those areas actually volunteering?
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think that goes back to what Kim was saying is like, what are the purpose of these? If we don't have a lot of rural opportunities, what are we doing as a board and as staff to make sure that we're marketing to those areas to get more opportunities and volunteers in those areas?
Mhm. Yeah.
Right. And I think the general sense when that kind of smaller group was working on developing these overall goals is that again, it's about expanding the reach to all Tennesseans, that we may not be there right now, but
Mhm.
that's the goal, is that Volunteer Tennessee can make it easier for people to volunteer, young people, old people, urban, rural, you know, all of those kinds of different folks. That would be one of the goals over this 3-year period, is for Volunteer Tennessee to work to get more of those people involved in volunteering. It was kind of how, which is why those Roman numerals under number A are there, because those were kind of some of the specifics that came out of that planning group.
Yeah. Okay, so we just have to make sure that there's a partner for this output in the second section as well.
Yeah, do you want to move on to the second section?
I'm
Or-
okay to move on. Anybody else have any comments on the first section? There is a comment in the chat. And I'm not exactly it's not exactly clear to me what the comment's driving at. So Jim, can we, if this is a comment from the public, so do we address that later when we're almost done with everything else?
Yeah, you could certainly do it there. I mean, it looks like the suggestion was related to inputs for the action plan, but you know, we're not there
Yeah.
just yet. I mean, we can
Right.
record that comment for later on, but the input stuff it's too early to focus too much on that.
Okay. Okay. Okay, well then let's move on to the second section. Okay.
So this looks like the final outcome. Is this approved by the board?
Yes, the outcomes that are in there were ones that the commission discussed at that August meeting and determined, because there were a couple of possibilities for outcomes, and the commission decided on the ones that are in this version as ones they wanted to focus on.
Okay.
And again, the commission only developed outputs for the first goal. So under this goal, there are staff recommendations, public comment recommendations, and then versions of outputs from previous plans.
Okay.
And the number of counties is repeated here because the staff approached this from kind of a clean slate, and so we didn't assume that previous goal, that sample output would be accepted. So I think that the question that the commission will have to address, I mean, you all can certainly talk about it, is that county participation, is it more appropriate here or under the individual goal? Because again, the first goal is related to individuals. The second one is related to organizations and the support that Volunteer Tennessee provides to those organizations.
Mm-hmm.
That is, if the committee wants to include that. Again, those are just suggested outputs from the staff. You don't have to take any of those.
Mm-hmm. I think it does fit better here, right? Because it has to do with the Volunteer Tennessee reaching out to the counties, giving them guidance on how to find volunteers who might be deserving of the honors. And
should I could get rid of it from the first one if we're gonna approve it here.
Yeah, well, what do the rest of you think? I mean,
I
Yeah.
I kind of think it goes better with the first one because the goal is supporting a robust network of volunteers, whereas the second goal is about capacity for volunteers. So I feel like those two different things, but I mean, I don't feel strongly one way or the other. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we could leave it in both places and
You can leave it
discuss
in
as a
both for now
larger
and see what everybody else says. So the first staff output has to do with the number of trainings provided by Volunteer Tennessee subgrantees will increase. I don't know. I don't know if that's as relevant as the other ones that are listed here. Like the informational events to promote Tennessee Serves. That is pretty important, and that's definitely something that we can assist with. Any comments from anybody else on these staff suggestions for outputs? Can we go down a little bit and look at the ones that the sample ones that we're bringing from last year?
So I do like the first proposed output by staff, the number of trainings provided, because that looks at how are we building that volunteer success and getting them engaged. I also really like the first proposed output from the public, because if we're talking about capacity, we have to make sure that we're tracking what's actually being filled versus not. And then in the sample outputs, I do like the fourth one down, because again, I think that talks about, again, that capacity building, but also how are we promoting engaging other industries to kind of be a part of that. But
Sorry, that was this one?
then
The fourth one?
under sample outputs. Yeah. Increase nonprofit, government, business, and educational institution. Those are the three that stood out to me just reading through them.
So there was this fourth one, there was this first one that you liked. Sorry, what was the middle one?
Sorry, the first public one.
Yes.
I like that one a lot.
So if you don't mind, I think staff did talk about this. There was the concern that they might be they might be meeting the need, just because an opportunity is listed and isn't filled through Tennessee Serves doesn't mean it wasn't filled or met, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, but it might reflect on if there's an opportunity listed that it wasn't clear, what the need was that opportunity not worded the right way, or should it maybe not have been an opportunity at all?
Yes, I mean, we can certainly go ahead with it. I was just sharing staff.
Yeah.
I think a little bit more info.
Yeah. I mean, because if you know if you know which opportunities weren't filled, then the nonprofit could investigate. Like, well, why weren't these filled at all? And we could give them guidance on how to do that. So I do like that one. I like the I actually like the second one under public as well, about repeat volunteers. But we do have that item in the first section as well about volunteers who are volunteer more than one time. But if volunteers sign up for an ongoing opportunity, let's say a weekly opportunity, and they only come once or twice and then they drop out, what kind of support does can Volunteer Tennessee give the nonprofit to retain those volunteers? So I don't know if I like the way that's worded, but I like the concept. Any thoughts? We're down to just 3 minutes left. We didn't get very far.
Well, it was good. It was a good discussion, so I wouldn't worry too much about that.
Yeah.
Well, the other committees are doing kind of the same thing, so
Yeah.
probably time to move on to the public comment part. But
Yeah.
we didn't receive a request to do public comment.
Eileen, I have one question,
Sure.
just as we're wrapping that up. Thinking about your history and experience working with the grant making program, is there anything that we're missing when we look at ways that you'd like to measure and learn there specifically? I feel like I hate for that expertise to possibly be lost because we were looking at the big picture. Is there something that you've been thinking about? Because this part of it's new for me, and I'd be very curious to know if there's something that sparks that curiosity for you.
Right. Well, it seems like from what we've talked about so far that we're very much focusing on the volunteerism piece, like as opposed to the AmeriCorps piece, and the grant the work that the grant committee does has been historically focused on AmeriCorps. But it doesn't, I think it doesn't hurt for grants committee to think a little more broadly and, figure out how can we be involved in more than just AmeriCorps. Yeah. I know that it's AmeriCorps also, but grants committee has, been quite involved in site visits. I know it's been a goal of the grants committee for a long time as well.
Yes, if you don't mind, with only 1 minute, I do think that's a good point, Kim, that there might be some things that grants committee does beyond the AmeriCorps outputs that are in that final one that are just like required by statute. Like, how our review process goes, how many reviewers are involved, although those might also be inputs. Although now it's also 12 o'clock. So I know we'll continue this conversation at the commission meeting. So certainly good that we have things to continue thinking about. Yes. Let me pass it back to Eileen to wrap it up.
Okay, sure. I was just going to ask Jim, does the agenda for the retreat call for breakouts for committees at all?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so we'll have a chance to talk as a committee about this some more at the retreat. So does anybody else have anything else to talk about? Does the member of the public want to say something about the comment in the chat? Okay, well, we'll keep the comment in our minds as we do the rest of our review. Thank you. Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. We'll adjourn until next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.